Well, it is awesome to be here at the Longevity Unleashed. We're going to have a rapid fire discussion today. We have some amazing panelists, and I want to just start with Dr. Harvey. If you could really quickly introduce yourself.
My name is Dr. Harvey Castro. I'm an ER doctor. I'm the first person in the world to write a book on ChatGPT and healthcare in 22. I'm currently an advisor for the country of Singapore, the Texas Medical Association, and Phantom Space on AI and healthcare.
Awesome. So glad you're here. And Dr. Arlen Myers, would you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm an emeritus professor of ear, nose, and throat surgery at the University of Colorado and president and CEO of the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs.
And Dr. Shaw, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Dr. Shah Shave, Integrative Medicine, NMD, and Master in Genetics. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. And next, if you could introduce yourself, Dr. G. It's so glad you're here.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Dr. G. I'm a doctor and designer. As far as I know, I think I'm the only person in the world who is a medical doctor, real estate professional, as well as an interior designer. I run and founded a company called The Well Home, which provides wellness design inside the home that's optimized for health.
And next, Douglas, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, and Michael, congratulations on bringing us all together. Yes, I'm Douglas Mulhall, and I am co-founder of Elastrin Therapeutics, which has the only therapy that reverses arterial calcification by targeting damaged elastin. And I've authored several books on the links between health, environment, and longevity technologies. This one here is the latest one, Discovering the Nature of Longevity, Restoring the Heart and Body by Targeting Hidden Stress. I spent several decades developing products and buildings that actually are designed to improve healthy longevity. And most recently, the International Standards Organization used our methodology to develop the world's first standard that describes the environmental health characteristics of products. It was published in February.
Excellent. And next, Ravi, Dr. Ravi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Ravi Kumar Reddy, internal medicine, master's in clinical translational investigation from Scripps and digital health. Had several different startup companies within the telehealth space and big data and AI, and currently running a health and longevity startup here in Austin, Texas.
Alex.
Hi, everyone. Michael, always great to be a part of your show. I'm in health tech. I've been building all kind of products, software, hardware, and AI solutions for healthcare and wellness industries. And currently, most of my time, I focus on my startup called Yod, Your Online Doctor Diagnostics. It's a medical device for telehealth. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we are going to start. And our first question today is, if we know that lifestyle changes like nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction offer the biggest return on investment for longevity, and the tools are all within reach, then why is it so hard to implement and sustain these changes? What are we really up against? Dr. Ravi.
Yeah, well, you hit the elephant in the room real quickly, didn't you, Michael? Thanks. So this is just to give some background on this. I'm really excited right now because the everyday person and consumer has access to technology, tools, data in a way that 10 years ago we were just hoping for, right? And that's really exciting. So there are two gaps here that need to be kind of transgressed. First was just giving data to the consumer, giving them insight about their bodies, whether it's through wearables, CGMs, getting their own labs, all those things, and the availability of ChatGPT and all those other tools as well to get data. But the big problem that I see here is, like I said, the elephant in the room, which is there is no way to shortcut the fact that most of these chronic diseases we're dying from are lifestyle diseases. And that the biggest bang for buck really comes down to these areas of lifestyle and behavior change. You mentioned a couple of them: sleep, nutrition, exercise, probably mindfulness, and the mindset that goes along with that, in addition to things like close family relationships that are all really, really related to longevity. So although I love the cold plunges, I love the peptides, I love all that stuff, and those are great tools, what really concerns me is this gap that's really hard, right? And it's the one we're all familiar with. It's the promises we make every January 1st on how we're going to make these changes. And then by about March 1st, we're all back to our normal square one, right? So this is a problem not just of physiology. And this is not a problem that just GLP-1s can fix. This is a psychology problem. This is a problem of behavioral psychology where we really need experts. And I mean more than just physicians, because honestly, physicians, we're a little bit trained in behavior change, but we're not really the experts in that unless we're really focused in it. But there's a whole team of people here: health coaches, dietitians, personal trainers, life coaches, executive coaches, that when brought together, I think can help bridge this gap. And it's difficult because in the behavior change space, we call it the intention action gap, right? We want to eat better. We want to avoid having a sedentary lifestyle, not getting up to walk. We talk ourselves out of it. We're distracted. We're stressed. It's hard for us to visualize the future consequences. It's sometimes these feedback loops take a long time. So you're like, well, if I work out for 3 months, like it's going to take forever for me to see a difference or whatever. So we end up where these things start to fall off and we don't make them priorities. I mean, people are busy. They've got kids, mortgages, other responsibilities. And it's sometimes hard to fit these things into a healthy lifestyle. And that's what it is, right? And not just habits. It's really about using a toolkit to implement, to turn these activities into a lifestyle. Because to me, this is like why I hate the word biohacking, because you can't hack your way out of behavior change, right? We have to be able to instill and help people make those changes. And those are all just regular human foibles that get in the way of that. But there is a skill set and teams of people who can help us. I'm very optimistic about this area of longevity, which I think, like you said, is the biggest bang for buck for me personally, is helping people make those changes and sustain them in a way for a lifetime.
Does someone have would someone like to add, Dr. G?
Yeah, I would like to. I mean, first, Ravi, I think you nailed it on the head. I think that's absolutely right in terms of what our big challenges are. I like to say that we need to reset our defaults, right? Our current defaults are really set on a system that's rigged against us, where it's playing against us, right? We tell people to sleep better, but then we put them in front of big TVs and, fake lights. We tell people to move more and we put them behind desks and sedentary lifestyle. So there's a lot of stuff that we're combating from a system that's designed to really keep us sick. The other big thing that I think that I'd like to say when it comes to behavioral change, as human beings, we're just really horrible at the marshmallow test, right? This is that famous study that was done out of Stanford some number of years ago, which was designed from a leadership and success standpoint. But really, we are a human nature. We choose our short-term vices, at the sacrifice of long-term gains. And so that directly applies to the health. And I think the big hurdle that we have to try to overcome is not necessarily try to get people to change the behaviors, but how do we alter the environment so that we make health the easy choice? Because I think right in today's day and age, health is really the hard choice. As you said, we get our resolutions January 1st, but then March 1st happens and all of those things go out the door. But I think you nailed it on the head in terms of the tackle.
If I could add something to that too, Gautam, I agree. And one thing we found at our startup is that it's like building a car. It's like you can't just use one screwdriver. There's like a set of tools that you need to use. And we use the word habits a lot, but habits are just one part of that. Willpower is another part of it. Environment is another part of it. Coaching is another part of it. And when you look at people who are actually able to sustain these changes and you reverse engineer what they're doing, they've kind of reinvented themselves and kind of used several of these tools in conjunction with each other to create this kind of emergent new lifestyle. And to me, that's like, it's a skill. It's just like no one's born knowing how to do that because of the hyperbolic discounting and other things you mentioned. And I, was when I was a younger doctor, I was like, oh man, these people are just fat and stupid. Like why won't they change? And it's like, I actually don't believe that anymore. I do believe people want to change. I just think they need the support. And all you have to do is like, look at Amazon, look at the behavioral economics models behind things like Amazon it makes me buy things I don't even need for some reason. How do they do that? Netflix makes me binge watch things that I don't want to watch. How do they do that? It's like we can apply these principles in a positive way to people's health behaviors. And I think that's really going to be part of the future.
You know, when you look and you talk about what's the solution to all of that, I think we're all agreed that that's the problem. I mean, you got 40% of the population living from paycheck to paycheck. The insurers have a big role to play here because they're the ones who can actually incentivize people to do that with money and services. And right now, they are still, by and large, not on the longevity or health wagon. They're still in this system that is providing sick care to people. But if insurers start doing things, and Kennedy's been talking about this, like improving your diet and going to the gym, that incentive for people who are living from paycheck to paycheck, and as you mentioned, have several kids and everything else, becomes a lot more attractive.
I would add that.
Yeah, but Jeff, I don't know that the incentive structure is not really laid out there, right? So if we have an employer-based insurance system where people are hopping companies every 2 years or so, if they make the investment today in somebody's proactive health, preventative health predominantly, then some other insurance company in the future is essentially going to reap the financial benefits from it. I think that needs to somehow change. I don't have a solution for it, but it's always
well, one thing is to make it competitive. So yes, let them compete with each other to make people healthier. And so that's I think a key thing to make this work for people who have no time.
Can I offer a different opinion there, Douglas? I really appreciate what you're saying. But empirically, what we've noticed, and we went to the employer markets first to do this, and I looked at and even tried these different services. I'll give you an example, like Virgin Pulse, right? Something that's laid out to like someplace like IBM, where it's like, here's your Fitbit for every employee. I come home one day, and my wife, and she's enrolled in Virgin Pulse at work, right? And she gets $75 or whatever, and they're trying to incentivize her to be healthy. And I'm like, "Where's the dog?" And it's like, "Oh, she's running around." I'm like, "Why?" "Oh, I put the Fitbit on her collar." I'm like, "Why'd you do that?" It's like, "Oh, it's the easiest way to get steps." It's like people game the system in a way that way, and it's like there's also this thing I've noticed with our clients when there's something about buy-in. It's like when you put your credit card into our system, it's like you automatically get this buy-in where you're incentivized to make the change because you kind of made the choice. That seems to be the initial step of the behavior change. And then we can then use the coaching team to make really small steps and things that are cheap, and we can build on that. But I've noticed that as well. I mean, when I look at like the employer-based services, it usually ends up being that the utilization is really low. Like people like it, but they never really seem bought into it. Whereas like the direct-to-consumer model seems to be the way I'm leaning toward more these days when it comes to individual longevity, just because people care about their health. They're investing
I
in their
think they
health.
go together hand in hand. I don't think it's one or the other. I think you're quite correct on that. But we need to have a better relationship between the insurers and those types of consumer incentives.
So do we want to, let's, with some of the questions, I think this whole employer market and how we create a actual incentive or alignment and payments that came up last time is very difficult and much to be talked about. But let's go back to, will AI extend our lifespan? Despite optimism, some scientists caution that there is currently no definitive evidence that AI will yield radical increases in human longevity. Dr. Arlen Myers, would you like to expand on this one?
Yeah, sure. So just a couple of things. One, just as an anecdote, the cell phone, the iPhone was launched in 2007. And I would wager that very few on this panel could have estimated the impact of the iPhone on our life. It was just this thing was launched. And most of us, or some of you, are familiar with Amoro's law, which is technology is overestimated in the short run and underestimated in the long run. So with that preface, artificial intelligence, I believe, and so do a lot of other people, that we're in the early stages. We have absolutely positively no clue where this is going to lead to. But at present, to get to the answer to the question, I think they're great possibilities, but that's exactly what I think they are, possibilities. Now, there are some anecdotal examples of how artificial intelligence can improve people's health health span, and lifespan. I mean, the most recent example was a gene transfer in a kid who had, 1 in 200 disease and seems to be doing okay. But there are 4 basic areas where artificial intelligence probably will have an impact. One is biogerontology, that is manipulating the cell and the basic science of proteins, gene transfer, omics, that kind of stuff. The second is geron technologies, medical devices that will assist the aging population. The third, and probably the most talked about one, is drug discovery and development. And the fourth is digital health, including artificial intelligence and probably remote patient monitoring, which Ravi alluded to. But when you look at actually what has happened at scale, there are very, very few things at this point. Everybody's talking about them. And, there are 8 or 10 things that drug discovery companies are doing to improve the drug discovery essentially is plagued by really expensive, lots of failures, difficult to get patients recruited into clinical trials, and an extremely tight regulatory burden. Some of those things are going to improve with artificial intelligence. I was just on a call before this one with a medtech group, and one of the folks there is actually producing an artificial intelligence platform to accelerate regulatory approval of new products. It's an extremely onerous, labor-intensive, in some ways subjective process to get FDA approval. Well, this is a roadmap that he claims could lessen the cost by 10x and exceed the speed of getting it to a patient by 10x. Now, that's a lot of money when you're considering the future value of a patent. So there are many, many examples of people trying to do this. But if you're asking me, do I think at present this is extending lifespan or health span at scale? No.
Yeah, Arlen, I think you're right in some ways. I think one thing I would add is, I think about the health span and the lifespan is either talk about life extension or we're really talking about health span, right? Which is kind of like living functionally longer, which I think is the latter is I think what actually a lot of us really want. I'm not sure everyone actually wants, when we say longevity, it's a great buzzword, but I'm not really sure, life extension by itself is great. And I agree. I think AI can really help in that life extension space, especially when we talk about the 12 hallmarks of aging and being able to do all the molecular diagnostics, drug discovery, and all the stuff around that. What excites me on the other way to do health span, right? So other than life extension, you're really talking about identifying the diseases that are going to take most people out and avoiding those or mitigating the effects. The AI coaching space to me seems really interesting. We've been trying to work on it. I haven't seen it yet work really well. I see a lot of AI instruction. I see people trying it. It's not just our company. But it's as you mentioned about the iPhone, there's like a place like India where there's 563, I think, million smartphones and growing, right? Like that market, everyone will have a smartphone on the planet at some point. It's like, why doesn't everybody at age 22 have an emotionally aware, context aware, psychologically active coach that can coach them toward making those better lifestyle decisions from a very early age? That to me is a future I want to live in and help create. I think that could really help health span. But like you said, I haven't seen it yet. Even though we're working on it, it's a really hard problem to solve.
I think that,
but that excites me.
Yeah, I think there's another question, and that is, can we use artificial intelligence to do what we're talking about? The more important question is, should we? Because if you look at what I think is another very large elephant in the room, is the fertility crisis and the aging population and the economic and societal impact that is already having in every country in the world, with the exception of sub-Saharan Africa. So while we're dealing with this issue of who's going to pay for Aunt or me, we're at the same time talking about extending life expectancy. And I don't see how you reconcile the two. That creates enormous problems. So I don't think it's going to stop. The cat's out of the bag. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Use whatever metaphor you want. And particularly capitalism is driving it. And oh, by the way, some people feel that decreasing fertility is the result of iPhones and decoupling women who are in fertility bearing age, and they're basically single. I mean, half the people in the United States between the age of 18 and 35 are single. And by single, I mean they're not married and they're not living with anybody else. They're single. I'm interested, Shah, if you could comment on that, since you're obviously the only woman in the room. So what's your thought about that?
Actually, I'm in total agreement with whatever you just mentioned, because in the healthcare system, for sure, there is a gap for women's health, and how we can, from the preventive perspective, how we can just fill out the gap. So I'm totally in agreement with whatever you just mentioned earlier. And of course, when we have a different policy, and every year we have lots of regulation around this area, but we need to be clear once for a lifetime which side we're gonna choose. If we wanna go from the preventive medicine side, longevity supposed to be the offspring of the preventive medicine for decades. That's not a new thing. Right now, they are just marketing longevity in a different fashion. But we need to be sure that we have enough information and algorithm before just moving to the AI or all of those things. I'm totally in agreement with technology and that part, especially we have a gene therapy, we have a CRISPR, lots of good technologies out there, and we need to merge to that movement as well. But somehow I think this is very important point that you just mentioned.
I'm going to jump in. I'm working for the country of Singapore, and one of the main things that their hyper-focus is their aging population. They're looking at about a population of 26% over 65 by the year 2030. And so they're having to be very proactive. And to Dr. Meyer's point about, the care and the expense, should we even do this? What they're actually doing is jumping into the preventative care and jumping hard into AI. And so to give you an example, they have a retinal scan of every single citizen. They have their genome sequence of every single citizen. And they're going through and saying, okay, familial hypercholesterolemia is one disease that they're attacking early. They know these patients would have a heart attack in their early 20s. And so they're literally putting them in statins when they're in their teens. And so these are the things that they're doing to prevent the issues that we were just talking about. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, but Harvey, Singapore is Singapore. How do you get people 20 years old to take medicine for the rest of their life?
I know that's a cultural awareness. I agree. And it's something that I love talking about AI and VR. Here's an example where if I was their particular physician, I would put VR glasses on them. I would walk through their anatomy of their heart. I would show them their heart pathology, what that could look like if they're not taking their meds. We speak to people at their level. If I speak to someone out in Europe, I'm going to use European examples. If there are certain cultural sensitivities, I'm going to make sure I talk to them in the angle. As you know, when we have different generations of people that we manage, we talk to them differently. I wouldn't talk to a 20-year-old physician the same as I would to a 50-year-old. I would use different examples.
Yeah, well, the point I'm trying to make is these vary so much by culture. The latest example is, do you really think it's a good idea to allow people to buy potato chips and Coke with food stamps? Why does that happen? I'm not blaming anybody or casting any disparities or making the right or the left argument. I'm simply making an observation. In the United States, at least up until recently, we, the taxpayer, pay for people to buy potato chips and Coke. And what is it? 40% of the population is obese and God knows what. Why does that happen?
Well, I think the problem is we as the United States government subsidize the big corporations, first of all, to create that corn syrup. So, I mean, let's hold off on that one. Let's go back to the topic today. What role does the home play in optimizing our health for Dr. G? I do agree that is a topic of discussion, but not for today. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Earl, and I could probably spend all day talking about how the system's designed against us from all the way at the top. But yeah, the home, I think it's probably one of the most overlooked areas and opportunities for us to impact health, right? I like to say that if you give me somebody's home, I can actually predict what their health will be. I mean, if you think about it, we spend over 92% of our time in an indoor environment. And of that, about 76 to 78% of our time is spent inside of our homes. And yet it really boggles my mind that we've never looked at the home as a vessel for health optimization and disease prevention. And I think that time needs to change. I mean, given how much time we spend in the home, we've got, 2/3 of the population living with chronic health diseases. And so I certainly believe that we're a product of the environment we keep. And our habits are actually informed by how we inhabit our spaces and how we inhabit our homes for the most part. So for me, all the signals are there, right? We sleep in our home, we move in our home, we eat in our home, we think in our home, we socialize in our home. Yet these are things that we oftentimes don't look at from a design perspective. Like, how are they optimized to address all of that stuff? So going back to what Ravi was talking about earlier, in terms of getting down to the basics, resetting our defaults, our habits are formed predominantly by how we live inside of these homes, and we take it to our outside environment. So if we can shape that space in certain areas in certain ways to optimize, to make health the easy and default choice, then ultimately I think that we can slowly impact behaviors over the course of time. I think this is also, to Ravi's earlier point, this is just one tool of many tools that are sort of in our toolbox, but I do think it's an important tool. And in fact, I'm a wholehearted believer that the most important medicine for our health doesn't come from a pill. It comes from our home. So I'll leave you at that. But if there's, I would love to hear other people's take and opinion on what they think about this.
No, telehome health companies are cutting back. Home health is cutting back. Why? I mean, after the epidemic. Why? Because they don't get paid to do it. And frankly, the patient says they would much prefer to see a person than look in a screen.
That's something, though, a little different. You're absolutely correct. I completely agree that the design of these buildings, we've spent the past 30 years designing healthy buildings, and we've seen measurable improvements in the occupants' health, a reduction in their sick leave. It's absolutely clear that you can get significant improvements in human health by designing the buildings, the materials, the products that go into them, and you can get measurable results. We've developed a whole cadre of buildings around the world that do that, and this is growing now. So it's a very interesting and productive way. And as you said, people are spending 80 to 90% of their time inside these buildings. So you want to make sure, like, indoor air quality is a huge issue. It's easily solved from the design perspective, but you have to have your architects and designers understanding that is the important thing to do, and that it can produce financial returns for the owner occupier.
And I want to jump in. I just got back from Germany, and I was in Munich, and the individual that was with me, he's like, "Hey, can you ride a bike?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course." And he's like, "Good, because this is what we do." And I was looking at it, and literally everywhere I went, there was streets that were closed, parts of the area that was closed, and everybody was using a bike. And he asked me, he's like, "The reason I ask is I have some Americans come and they say I really can't ride a bike." And I thought, interesting. And it's that culture. I mean, there's e-bikes at places, but then there's tons of bikes that if you don't have a bike, they have bikes there for you. So it's a different culture.
Yeah, one thing I noticed with the behavior change thing is I saw this really interesting article on LinkedIn that was like longevity clinics were failing. And I think I wrote back, well, longevity clinics are failing because longevity doesn't happen in the clinic. It happens in the home and at work where those behavioral decisions are made. And that's where I'm really excited about the AI coaching thing, because that's where AI can really intercept people before they make those bad choices or promote or help to make the good ones. But Douglas, Gautam, can you guys, I mean, I'm just curious to see, like, what are like the top 3 things that someone can do in their home or in like when designing a workspace. You know, we spend 90,000 hours of our lives at work. What are like the easy 3 things that people can do to change those environments? And I know one of them right now, after hearing this, is I gotta forget there's Nutella in the fridge over there. I'm gonna go throw that out now. But that being said, like, what are those easy design choices that people can make?
Well, number one is to change and maintain the air filters in your air handling systems. Whether it's in very hot zones or very cold zones, indoor air quality is actually made worse by a lot of these air handling systems. And that's where you get the particulates that people are inhaling. So that's definitely, number one that you can do. And if you don't have an air handling system, you can actually put a certified clean air local air purifier right next to where you're working and sleeping. So those are 2 examples of what you can do, and I'm sure that others have other examples.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tricky question to answer, Ravi, just because I think it needs to be very personalized. People live differently depending on your environment, your zip code, who you're living with. So the answer is a little bit different. There are some low-hanging fruit. I think the air and water are definitely 2 of the top. As Doug had pointed out over there. But also I think sleep, lighting, as we lock ourselves in these boxes, put fake lighting in. And I think that's really messing with our circadian rhythm, and which in turn, we know how sleep is actually part of the trifecta that impacts your metabolism, as well as your exercise ability, fatigue, all that kind of stuff. So it's really a domino effect. I think what's really important to recognize is when you talk about the failed elements of longevity clinics, the way we see it is the longevity clinics are certainly doing a service in terms of being able to identify and uncover where the challenges are in terms of behavior and health modifications are needed. But what ends up happening is we give great advice, great tools, great protocols, great supplements, great treatments and interventions, and then we send them back to their old environment that only perpetuates their bad behaviors and bad habits. And that to me just never made any sense. And then we wonder why they keep coming back with the same elements. And I think it's sort of a missing piece. It's a holistic approach to ensure that you're not just addressing their particular health needs and challenges, but also ensuring that their environment is supporting whatever it is that we recommend as physicians or providers that they should be doing.
Shah, I would like to get to a question of yours, the integrating AI, genomics, biomarkers, longevity tech. How can we redefine preventative medicine for, equitable, multi-generational health span, within our public health,
Sure. So I just mentioned earlier in regards to the longevity, which is quite the offspring of the integrative and preventive medicine. So it's supposed not to be a market back in time. It was a mission. Now we have a personalized care and we just moved to the different era. And I think that this is very important that we choose the best leadership at this point, that they can just guiding people through the wellness more and more. So for sure, we have a term, we call it docere, which how we just training people, educate them enough that they can choose the best option possible. So I think that there is a lots of details that we can talk about, but our role is just fill the gap between the science, AI, capital, and care and insurances and everything. Then I think that we can just move to the next stage.
Anyone?
Could you educate us about the present status of integrative medicine and that situation? In other words, how many practitioners are there? How are they different? What's the impact versus traditional Western medicine? That kind of stuff.
So of course we have some issues in regards to the regulation and licensing. So we have some of the practitioners. I believe we have around 7,000 in United States. that right now just working as a primary care. So they are just mostly focusing on a family medicine and preventive medicine. So, and another issue is which state we are talking about, which age we are talking about. They are all of these points they need to get addressed before we just move to the policy, regulation, and everything. So I believe around 7,000 or 8,000 primary care we have in this medicine.
And what, to the question, what is the impact of pharmacogenomics or genomics in your practice of integrative medicine to expand lifespan or health span?
For sure. So when we are talking about the longevity and preventive medicine, we need to care about the personalized medicine, precision medicine, and we just not seeing the patients as regular patient. We're just going through the detail. For example, we have a biomarkers, we have a different genetic test available for the patient. It can help to prevent, not to get to the point that we cannot just move forward. And this is not about the supplement. I just want to mention this one. We have this tendency to talk about the supplement when we are talking about the functional medicine, when we are talking about what we should do. Is not about the supplement. Integrative medicine or all of the preventive medicine, not necessarily talking about the supplementation or those kind of things. This is the exact protocol that we design for the exact patient based upon all of those components. For example, in genetics, when we are talking about the environmental impact, genetics impact, and epistatic impact, which is some of the factors that we cannot control. If we can use the AI and technology in that section, I believe that we can optimize the result and patient outcome.
Doug, would we like to move to your question on this elastin? You're like a physicist of elastis. Can you tell us more about what this is and why it's so important?
Sure. I have a group activity that everyone can do. So it's called the pinch test. So I want everyone to do this. You take the skin on the back of your hand, you pinch it between your thumb and your forefinger, you pull it up for a few seconds, and you let it go. Now, if you're an older guy like me, it goes down really slowly. If you're a younger person, like a lot of people in this room, it goes down faster. That is actually the elastin that is in your skin. And as you get older, it degrades. Now, elastin is really the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of the human body, because on one hand, it's responsible for lending flexibility to most of our organs, our arteries, our lungs, our ligaments. Anything that stretches, recoils, is because of elastin fiber. So you can imagine how that is important that is for health and longevity. But on the other side, there's a problem. And that is that when all of us reach about the age of 30, our body stops assembling elastin fiber and it starts to fall apart. And when that happens, you get a vicious cycle of injury, inflammation, and calcification. So the injury comes from oxidative stress that, as you all know, is created by a whole range of stresses, from bad food to toxic chemicals to repetitive stress injury, all of which create this oxidative stress that actually knocks little chinks off this elastin fiber. And after that, you get an inflammatory response in the body. And because the elastin fiber is not being replaced, the inflammation is repeatedly cleaning up the mess, but nothing is replacing it. So the inflammation becomes chronic. And after a very short period of time, when the body figures out that actually chronic inflammation isn't working that well, it goes to plan B. And the plan B is to try and wall it off. Now, a lot of injuries are actually helped along by calcification of injured nodules that the body then dissolves later on. But there's a real problem when that happens in the arteries, because you don't get dissolution of the calcification. It builds up and it builds up and it builds up, which is why most of us turn to stone as we age. So you can appreciate how incredibly important elastin degradation is for the aging process. And there's a piece of good news here. And the good news is that over the past 20 years, a group of scientists who are actually quite separate from each other around the world have figured out different ways to fix elastin fiber. And the really remarkable thing is that today, a couple of those products are already in the market. 3 of them are in clinical trial, and several others are in preclinical development. So here we have, for the first time, signs that we can actually restore the damaged elastin in our body and reverse the calcification that is such a major player in heart disease. So the important thing here is that elastin fiber is a greatly underestimated player in both our health and longevity and chronic diseases, including the diseases that kill most of us, heart disease and cancer. So it's a very, very important part of our health and longevity.
Love it, man. Gonna get my elastin therapy now.
Well, it's interesting because I'll just give you 2 examples. One is aneurysms. You all know that there is no cure for aneurysms. There's some advances being done, but 8 million people have them and risk a catastrophic bursting of their arteries. Well, for the first time, a company in a clinical trial has actually proven that you can prevent aneurysms from growing, and in some cases actually make them regress. They have done this by targeting elastin fiber with a naturally derived product called pentagalloyl-glucose, or PGG for short. And they are now in phase 3 clinical trial. So this is really exciting. There's another development for repairing wounds that is in stage 3 clinical trials right now, developed by Professor Weiss at the University of Sydney in Australia. And his team developed a completely different technology, which is an elastin, a tropoelastin covered scaffold that is inserted into a surgical wound or a wound that has just occurred, and it eliminates scarring from the wound. And that is actually in clinical trial for, of all things, acne scars, but also surgical wounds. So this is happening right now in real time, and it's great.
Dr. Harvey, we'd like to ask you your question. How will ambient AI wearables that disappear in everyday life, how will this shift us from, the sick care we know to this proactive health span extension / longevity?
Yeah, good question. Big picture, took off my iWatch. This thing is giving me HRV, how much I slept or didn't sleep last night. But we have all this data, but what am I doing with that data? Are we analyzing? Am I even looking at it? Do I get an alert? Does this thing nudge me to maybe get off my butt and start walking around this office? The answer is yes, maybe. And so just to give everyone a quick example, I took my data, I made sure to encrypt it and all that stuff, and I put it into a particular AI, and then that AI gave an analysis of longevity. And it did an analysis of what's out there, supplements, is that true or not, the research that's out there. And it gave me a whole report. And then I didn't really care, so I put it on a website. So feel free to hit me up and I'll give you the link so you can look at it. But my point is this, being able to take that data, integrate it into AI, then it was able to export a whole plan of, gave me a 90-day plan of what to do to increase my longevity. And then it backed it up with science. These are the things that, yes, it's for me, it's easy to do. And for others, it'll be easy as well once I teach them how to do it. But big picture, this type of technology is here, and more people will be able to leverage it to increase their quality of healthcare and their health.
I 100% agree. So I agree, because in 2021, where there was a boost of investment in digital health, medical devices was a huge part of it. But the problem that everybody faced, that adoption was still very slow, because there was so much data now generated by all those devices. And before we started using AI, nobody could really cope with that and manage the data. And now with AI capabilities, you can actually analyze, find those trends and flag any potential issues that might happen. So I 100% agree. Right now, I think it's going to be another boom of medical devices, especially for remote diagnostics. and AI is going to definitely help with that.
If I can say something, Harvey, I'm really excited about that and the premise you're saying there too. But I'm just, one thing that I've noticed as being a co-author of one of the largest digital health trials that's ever failed out of Scripps, under Eric Topol, which was called the Wired for Health study, where we gave people all this data information. We even gave them iPhones, Cardias, all this stuff. What I've learned from just, I think all of us have been in digital health for a long time, or back when it was called wireless medicine even. One thing I've learned is, one of the biggest fallacies I've noticed in myself is this idea that if I just had more information about myself, that somehow translates to me making better decisions. And that gap just doesn't, 5% of people, actually about 6% if you look at the data, are able to bridge that gap. Most of the people who are able to bridge that gap are startup founders, kind of very type A people, executives, C-level, C-suite people kind of like us who are very self-motivated. But the other 94%, are really having trouble. So I love the word that you used there when you said nudge, because I think that's what's needed, right? It's like that behavioral psychology piece. It's like the watch just telling me notifications, hey, go take a walk right now. It's like people are going to start turning those off, right? Like we've had Fitbits and these data elements and wearables for a long time. They're not translating to real outcomes. And I think when paired with kind of the behavioral psychological approach, environment change, the coaching, the habit formation, the willpower, I think that's a really powerful combination, right? It's like, I'm so glad now finally that we have these tools and they've permeated the populace in a way, because they become more affordable. And now it's just like, I think the missing piece already is this other part, right? Which is like, okay, now it's like, can we get these psychological nudges that are emotional, triggering, and correct through AI or people, and our team does it both ways, to really drive that change to make me want to walk, right? And that just takes a lot of psychometric profiling in addition to the biometric profiling is what we found. That's been my experience. But that's exciting. I really like the word that you used there when you said nudge, because I think that's really the key.
Yeah, and I want to add, just like this image of, it looks like we're a family here. It takes a village. It takes all of our minds to collectively be able to do something. And at the end of the day, that's why you guys are here. So I would encourage you guys to follow everybody that's here. The more we know, the more we all collectively help each other, the more we educate. And I call it improving our healthcare IQ. And the higher we get, hopefully that it improves with our quality of life and our longevity.
Ravi, what are your thoughts about, I mean, we've been talking about how to change patient behavior. So how do you change doctor behavior? I'm not suggesting, and I don't mean, healthy habits. I mean, their approach to practice and their mindset.
Yeah. So I think one thing is not to overextend them. I think so. It's a really good question. I've thought about this a lot too. So I think what's being asked of a lot of doctors, and the doctors here especially, is like that we keep getting asked to do more and more things. One thing I've realized is let us be good at the stuff that we're really good at, helping make the complicated decisions, helping patients navigate the path, outline the path for them, do the education as necessary. But what I've realized is real longevity, like Harvey was just saying, is a team sport, right? And we keep thinking it's like this top down, like doctor level, like the doctor's the shaman almost, right? In our culture, and like most cultures. In our company, what we've done is made the health coach the boss. I serve as more of a consultant, longevity consultant. The other doctors do some of the prescription work. There are people who need GLP-1s. There are people who qualify for Lipitor, and that's fine. But I would say let the doctors be the doctors and hand and pass the ball off to the rest of the team that are really trained in like the health behavior change, like the health coaches. So I think we need to I think the one thing I would say to here's one way another way to answer your question. When we take on a client who's already had a primary care physician, I usually just give that primary care physician a call, right? Like Dr. Shah, and just say, hey, your patient is on an intensive lifestyle therapy thing with our team. You know what that doctor says? Well, are you sure they're going to do it? I'm like, well, they're trying. And then I show them outcomes in 6 months. And they go, wow, so it's actually working. And they go, thank you so much for doing this. I didn't have to do it because I didn't have the time in my clinic. I think there's this cynicism that's happening within medicine, because like we try to tell our patients and we keep telling them, and they don't do anything. And so we get really cynical. But I think once they see that there are other allied members of a healthcare team, like personal trainers and dietitians who can help, and they see those outcomes, I think that I see that cynicism decreasing, and they're much happier when they're practicing because they're like, oh, I can just focus on what I need to do. You've taken this off my shoulder. So I think the more of these, and Dr. Sharkin probably talk about this too, more of an integrated practice model is the way to really change their behavior, or really in terms of their attitudes, because they get much more optimistic about, oh, wow, these people are actually getting better. You know, does that answer your question, Colin?
Yeah, it does, but it brings up a couple issues. One is how do we change medical education and the culture of medical education and training? Two, people complain that only 25% of medical schools offer anything in nutrition education. The problem is you could offer 17 courses, but they don't have the time and the money to do it. So why would you, I mean, to your point, and the last point is, I think this reflects the evolving change of the sick care workforce and people who assume these intermediary roles, specifically people that do not require a college degree.
I agree with you completely. That's
also,
a really good point.
The incentive structure is not aligned, right? I mean, that's sort of the low-hanging fruit here, is that people aren't paid to deliver this preventative, proactive care. And I think that until the system changes, we're not going to essentially see these two, competing worlds essentially playing along. I mean, it's funny, recently I wrote a post on LinkedIn that compared the traditional conventional approach to medicine versus the integrative longevity approach to medicine. One's reactive, the other one's proactive and preventative. But it's kind of like this unnecessary East Coast, West Coast rap feud that is essentially happening in our marketplace. And we need to, it's unnecessary, right? So somehow we need to get both playing along, because it is a complete spectrum of how the patient's health should be addressed, right? I like to say oftentimes that, health is not a point in time, it's a story over time. And we don't need to be waiting until somebody enters our healthcare system to be able to address that. But there are two very different ways of approaching healthcare and addressing our patients. And quite frankly, these two pools of physician populations are just not willing or wanting, or for whatever reason, not incentivized to work together and to collaborate. And I think that needs to somehow fundamentally change.
Well, the consumer health side, I think, is growing pretty quickly. When you talk about who's paying, it's like we always talk about payers, but the patients always end up paying, right? I mean, they're paying $24,000 a year right now, I think, is the average for a family of four for insurance, which is insane, right? Out of pocket, not in addition to the copays and the meds. But one thing we've noticed on why I think our clients are paying us quite a bit of money, actually, right? And you can see these other companies popping up, like Function Health, Superpower, even things like Peloton, even gym memberships. Like, people are paying into these things for a reason, because they want to feel better. One thing we've done that I'd be curious to see how you guys think about this, we've actually taken the focus off of their health. Like, when we talk to a client or a patient and say, do you want to enter this program? I don't say, hey, I can make you live longer, and this heart attack that is imaginary to you, and 30 years later, it's too hard for them to imagine. I'm more like, to a 65-year-old, she's like, I got to go to my daughter's wedding next year, and I want to be able to pick up my grandkids without falling over. It's like, we try to do a deep dive in what health means to them. Like, health is like just a transitory step to more functional outcomes. And when I start calibrating like these behavioral changes, or the GLP-1s, or all the longevity things we do, to what people actually want to do in life, you get a lot of really interesting answers. Like, we had a client the other day we just took on, and she was like, my husband and I don't get to spend a lot of time together because we're both working. But when we do spend time together, we go climb mountains, and I love to keep up with them, and I don't want to ever be not functional. I'm like, cool. Now I can use that to get you to sleep better, and to eat better, and to do that exercise. Whereas if I told her, you're going to avoid diabetes in 20 years or avoid a stroke, she's like, I don't know what that means, because she's not a physician. She just hasn't seen those things. So I feel like kind of recalibrating people and understanding, kind of meeting them where they are and recalibrating them to what these functional goals are, actually incentivizes them to be the payers directly. That's my hypothesis. That's what I've seen. Not that there's no role, again, obviously, for the insurance and payers.
Well,
Ravi,
as
what you're talking about here is the point that was made earlier about the need for more intermediate players. And I think your organization may be one of those, but that makes it a lot more practical and doable instead of only trying to figure out how we're going to retrain doctors, which is important. There's no question about that. But the role of the intermediate players that are at a different level is, I think, critical to rolling out the type of delivery that you're talking about.
Well, I want to ask you.
As we
sorry.
wrap up, we're kind of coming. I want to be respectful of time here as we're finishing up. We have two more questions. One, I think is really, this next one is very important. What is the single biggest predictor of health span? The quality of those extra years we're trying to live? Is it behavior, genetics, community mindset, or something else entirely? What is it? What is the number one thing we can do? Dr. Ravi?
I would say, given the data that I've seen, I mean, obviously there's some honorable mentions here, but for me, if you look at like the Okinawans, you know, the Samani tribes, the Hamza, all these, you know, these kind of long-lived people, it's the quality of close personal relationships. I mean, I think that is one of the most important things. We're social apes. We depend on each other. I think one of the greatest examples of this was during COVID, when everyone was locked down and isolated, and the kind of mental health problems that people have had as a consequence of that. I think, you know, when you look at communities that live a long time and are functional, so like health span, to me, that is the quality of close personal relationships. Those people that you hang out with, that you call, the people that went to your wedding that you don't call very often. You know, it's like I always tell our clients, I'm like, give those people a call and go, hey, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in a year. Tell me what's going on with your life. And they're like, well, I don't want to bother them. But when you make that call, what ends up happening is that other person goes, oh my gosh, I was thinking about you too. And I think those positive interactions are really important.
I think the biggest thing we can do is change a sick care system to a healthcare system. That doesn't happen in an examining room. It happens in a congressional hearing room. And that political reform and healthcare reform is something that's been going on for over 100 years. It's 100 years war. And of course, it requires leadership and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this, I guess my concern is, to me, there are three levels of toxicity: systemic, organizational, and personal. And to expect personal reform, I think, is wishful thinking. The system is the problem.
I think
Do you think it's realistic? Do you think it's realistic that we're going to change the system?
Well,
Yes.
if you don't believe that toxic systems can be changed, you're ignoring the lessons of history. Of course it can be changed. It's not easy, but just look throughout history of social revolutions and significant social reform. We're experiencing that as we speak. So my answer to your question is absolutely, but it's hard and it takes a lot of everything. And, you know,
Yep.
there's a lot written about that.
That's absolutely correct. And you can see that in the construction industry when you're talking about healthy buildings. So it has taken, 50 years to understand what does a healthy building mean and what does it do. And construction is probably just as tough as medicine to reform, but it is happening. And there are more and more practitioners out there.
Yeah. And I would say that the physician, and it's the last thing I'll say, is the indictment. These are self-inflicted wounds from the professional medical community. Our obligation to patients is to be their advocate. We have abrogated that responsibility, and frankly, it's a failure of the medical profession leadership.
Well, we also have to, one point to add here. We designed sickness into our lives, right? We've designed and manufactured all of this into our lives. So if we believe that that's the case, then inversely, the inverse must also be true, right? We should be able to design our way out in multiple different ways. And so, to sort of everyone's point here, I think there are certainly ways that we can address it from a multifactorial standpoint, both at the from Arlen's standpoint, the system, organizational, as well as the personal level. There are different things that we can essentially design our way out of this mess that we've created.
I have 3 points. I think that from the patient perspective, we need to consider preventive medicine, because when the body doesn't absorb whatever is needed, there is no other way. Let's be clear in this part. When we are talking about the data, especially about the longevity data, we need a clear data rather than just number of data without direction. And from the mindset of the practitioner or providers, I think that we should get rid of the competitive mindset in a longevity and just switch to the creative mindset. We don't need a line of the copy paste people that doing the same thing and they just want to get the different result. So we need creative people in this field rather than be in a competition because of the market, because of the, I mean, lots of details. I think these are important.
So I'd like to also finish up with a very thought-provoking question to inspire. We know certain mammals, like the bowhead whale, can live over 200 years. And some of the tools of longevity are already showing promise in the lab. Are the longevity breakthroughs we're seeing in mammals, from gene editing to cellular repair, already here? And can we actually learn from these long-lived species to apply to human health span as we wrap it up?
Yes,
Well,
but you have to be careful when you mess with Mother Nature.
That is absolutely true. But if the lessons to be learned from those animals, in particular, the Greenland shark and the bowhead whale both live to 250 to 350 years. But that species has been around for millions of years, whereas Homo sapiens haven't been around that long, and our immune systems aren't so well developed. So I think that what we can learn from those animals is, how did their immune systems develop so that they don't start turning on themselves around the age of 35, like our immune systems often do? And I think that is a learning. I'm not, by the way, suggesting that we can gene edit things from those animals into ourselves, but we can certainly learn from the epigenetic environment and the genes themselves in those animals how their immune systems have developed not to turn on them so early in their lives.
There have been some predictions, I believe, Ray Kurzweil, those sort of in that singularity world, where they tried to do some sort of analytic calculation. I may have these numbers wrong, but it was something along these lines of, if you're healthy and you're under 30, your ability to achieve a temporary escape velocity might allow you to live healthy until the age of, 150, 160, 170, based on current science and where the trajectory of current science is taking us and the pace of innovation. So, that's some interesting numbers in terms of like, how far can we take it? I don't think anyone truly has the answer, but can we extend it beyond what we have now to something of a better state and a healthier state? I'm certainly an optimist around that, but to the point, circling back to what was made earlier on, I certainly don't want to do it at the sacrifice of living those years in an unhealthy state, right? So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing it with a focus of health span and not sort of adding on to this notion of polypathology, as we extend our years into the hundreds.
As we wrap up, anyone else would like to finish?
I'd just say thank you guys to everybody. I learned a lot from the entire conversation and hope to follow up with you all. And if I can be a resource, happy to.
Likewise, I just want to say thanks, everybody. Learn from every single one of you guys, and I hope this is not our last time together. So let's keep in touch.
Thanks for putting it together.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Thank you,
It was
everyone.
really great.
Awesome. Well, we are going to call it a wrap. And I think we definitely not only touched longevity, but I would say we unleashed it. Lots of talking points, and we could have about a 3 more series impact on this. Really, thank you, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Thanks.
All right, thanks.